On I think it was Bloomberg, they posted something on Instagram that said it seems like it's in a really good time, or it's never been a better time to get a supply chain degree. And I'm thinking it's been that way for 15 years. Where the hell have you been?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we got Michigan State here. That's like the number one supply chain school where we do supply chain executive search. Like we've been doing this for 2 decades, and we keep talking about our consumption issues, how global trade affects things, that we need more supply chain people, more supply chain people, more supply chain people. But now Bloomberg comes out and says, "Hey, this would be a really good degree to get." So
What
I'm happy.
what surprised me, James, is that the manufacturing and supply chain gets a lot of attention, or manufacturing mostly. But there's some stats in this article that say like a quarter of a century ago, we had like 17 million manufacturing jobs in the U.S. And today it's at about 12 and a half, and at the trough it was at 11 million. We just haven't moved the needle considering how much attention manufacturing gets. And then, I mean, there's always policy discussions around manufacturing. There's, you know, President Trump, his whole thing was around onshoring and reshoring, but the needle never moves. So I'm just curious to know why.
Let's keep in mind, like, supply chain is everything. It's a lot of times I think supply chain gets brought up in the basket of manufacturing, which manufacturing relies on supply chain, but everything does. You know, your grocery store, your energy, everything needs to get transported, bought, materials, like supply chains everywhere, right? I think the bigger issue um, isn't just looking at supply chain woes here. It's let's look at manufacturing as a whole, with 25% of manufacturing being supply chain, and we go and want to add 5 million manufacturing jobs. Let's get us up to like 17 million, right? You said 12 million is kind of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to 17 million. Where will you find 5 million people right now to go work in manufacturing?
No way, no chance.
Because if I just drive from my house to the office, I'll count probably a minimum of 50 for hire signs, probably closer to 75. I don't see it happening. Dennis, I mean, you're running a executive search firm that does manufacturing and supply chain executive search. Do we have any clients that are like perfectly staffed right now?
Not one. Not one client, and everyone's in the same dilemma where they want to keep pushing for growth, and the hiring is just a roadblock for them, and it's just not enough people out there to get them moving. I mean, our clients right now are going out of their way to push the process forward in terms of onboarding and interviewing and whatever they can, especially now with the whole video conference interviews being um, more popular in terms of interviewing, just to keep the process moving forward. But if there are no people or activity for them to interview, it slows them down.
So, Ken, it brings me back to, it's like, how do we have a new push to revive U.S. factories because of the global supply chain issues, right? Semiconductors, raw materials. But even if you bring that all here, who's gonna do it? We can't do it now. So it's like we're in this place where, and I know you see it on the employer branding side, because a lot of manufacturing companies can't attract talent. It's, you come out of college and you think like manufacturing's a dirty thing. It's I want to work for Google or Tesla or Rivian, one of these cool tech startups where they got a popcorn cart that comes around, and it's all the cool stuff where it actually looks like you don't even have to work and you get paid 150,000. How do you do that versus, hey, come to this manufacturing company? And I know you try to help companies develop that online kind of brand persona to say, hey, manufacturing can be a fun place to work. You can make money here. You can grow a career. But I don't think that's what we're really seeing come out of college, right?
Right, right. And we've talked in prior episodes about how I've had conversations with leaders at companies that say that the education system is struggling to pump out the kind of talent that they need. And we can't keep allowing the colleges to pump out individuals that are skilled in over-indexed industries or oversubscribed industries, because then what happens to the greater economy? What you said there, James, was interesting, because there's this big disconnect between strategically what is probably the right thing to do, which is reshore, especially in a supply chain crisis like now. You reshore, you get closer to the customer. That's the right thing to do, probably strategically. But how do you do that when the backdrop is you can't find the people to do it? And another recurring theme, we're not doing anything to address the underlying issue, which is how do we get people back to work? Do we need to fix immigration to bring people in to do the work? It just seems like we're not doing anything and we're stuck. So that was a pretty poignant point. I thought that we can increase the number of jobs. That's just a capital thing for the most part. But how do you fill those jobs? And like Dennis said, if there isn't one client that is properly staffed at the moment, I think that speaks to how deep the issue is.
Does the world need any more social media managers?
No.
So I think if we went out online and just posted entry-level social media manager for $100,000 and entry-level, manufacturing supervisor, $100,000, same thing, right? Entry-level, 100,000. You'd probably get 2,000 applications for the social media manager and 50 for the manufacturing supervisor. It's just one of those things that I wasn't brought up that way. My father worked in a steel factory. It was, you worked to pay bills, to put food on the table, to like pay your car payment. And now it's like, if we can't do the job we want to do for what we think we should get paid, we don't want to work at all. Which I know you brought up in the past, that whole anti-work movement. And it's like, well, again, if we're trying to go anti-work, how the hell are you going to bring back 5 million jobs that nobody wants? We don't even want to work if it's a good job.
Yeah. I was watching the Hulu documentary on WeWork last night, and I got this overwhelming sense just watching that, and then thinking about the anti-work stuff on Reddit, that there's just this refusal within a generation, and then it's our generation really, but that a refusal to grow up and like do the hard things that contribute to GDP, that contribute to the overall growth of an economy. That was kind of the sense that I got when you watch the WeWork documentary, and I guess it's probably just a widespread thing.
I mean, we've used WeWork offices for expansion. Okay, and how many times were you walking around one and these people are getting paid a lot of money, but you never really see them working?
Yeah, a lot of conversations.
A lot of talking going on, and you sit out in the common area, they're not even talking work, right? They're drinking the free coffee, and like whatever vendor brought in like free donuts today, and they're talking about stuff on TV. And it's like, once you get in that mindset where you're really only doing like 15 hours of work a day for $85,000 a year, what happens when you got to get to a job where you actually really have to work? And then like it doesn't, manufacturing is real work, right? Well, who wants to do that when I can sit in the WeWork office and make 85 to 100 grand a year drinking free coffee? Manufacturing's got free coffee too. It's just that old school bun coffee that you can see through it, right? Like, you ain't getting no Starbucks around here.
I also think for supply chain, if you're going back to like graduates, when I got my degree from Michigan State, supply chain, of course, is all encompassing. So your classes are divided into purchasing and logistics and warehousing. But I believe it just becomes so large of a topic, and they keep funneling all these different categories under supply chain. Eventually, there's almost going to need to be like a subcategory degree under supply chain, depending on the type of like direction you want to go into supply chain. There's so much involved in it, and maybe that's an issue. Like if a graduate goes in there and they're like, "Whoa, what do I do? Do I go into do I become a buyer? Do I become a logistics analyst? Do I work on the shop floor and handle inventory and warehousing? Like, what do I do?" And I think that might be something to consider. Maybe universities are already doing that, but it doesn't sound like it.
I completely forgot for a minute that you even went to MSU and got a supply chain degree. It's like you're doing a supply chain episode, and Dennis has a supply chain degree from MSU. But I think that's one of the things about supply chain. You got probably 9 or 10 big buckets, like you said, that go logistics, materials, distribution, like procurement. There's MRP, ERP. There's so many things that you can do. So I think your 4-year undergrad in supply chain ends up being like one giant survey course. I would hope the colleges, like we do over at Employment Boost when we do the college planning, it's let's figure out where you want to end up and then map out how to get there. So you can't just say, oh, you should get a supply chain degree, they're hot, without figuring out, well, do you want to be a buyer? Or do you want to go more technology and work with SAP, for example, and really focus on the ERP side of things on supply chain and solving problems from like an analytical standpoint? And then you could probably map that out. And to be honest, it's maybe something that you have to go back and get that master's degree, not like an MBA, but like, go get something where you can really focus on whatever it is you want to get that emphasis in. But you kind of don't know. This is why I like the co-op jobs like Kettering/GMI does here in Michigan, where you go get a BSME, but then you have to go work for 3 to 6 months at a company doing some kind of engineering as part of your schooling. So you get exposure and you get the experience. Some of the best supply chain people I think we ever recruited in the last 2 decades didn't have master's degrees. In fact, some of them didn't even finish their bachelor's degrees. They've just been on the floor running massive operations for 20 years. So I think it's that mixed bucket of how do you go specialize in something in supply chain that you don't even know exists? And then you don't even know what would my day look like as a buyer? What would my day look like as a materials manager? There's, how many people, this, but how many people don't even understand what a materials manager does? So it's quite a few. So you can drill down, but I think getting the people into the workforce faster kind of allows them to go figure that out. Imagine if part of your requirement for supply chain degree was you had to do 2 co-ops and you had to go work in the back of the warehouse in the customer service side, dealing with customer orders and getting shipments together, small packaging and all that stuff. Go shadow buyers, shadow the people that are running. I mean, everyone's in ERP anyways, but there's people who just deal with the ERP side of things. Go let the student get exposure to all that and come back and say, okay, I know what I want to get. Like I want to get a minor in like ERP systems. That would set our workforce up for far more success.
I don't know. I also feel that, a lot of the students coming out of college, sometimes they get into logistics, and logistics to me is a little bit, more challenging, depending on the type of position, that whether you're going to be in like an account management side of things or sales and logistics, and it's such a low margin and just on the clock 24/7 environment. You got somebody with a supply chain major coming out of college and they just get into the wrong logistics company and they just have a miserable, first 6 to 12 months. It's like, well, forget this. I want to do something else. And I think a lot of that does happen, and it just turns people off.
I mean, way back in the day when I was doing recruiting, that was so common to see someone that had a supply chain degree or had some experience in manufacturing logistics somewhere, and you think, okay, I got this, gig over here, check this out. And they're like, I never want to go back into logistics and transportation. It's a cutthroat business. Many will say that it's just a dirty business. It's low margin, and logistics can be all encompassing. And we're thinking we're talking more on the like transportation side of things. I've had who knows how many hundreds of conversations with people. It's like I never want to go back in that business again, especially on the sales side of logistics. And it's like, well, we run into that when you're recruiting for a recruiting company. If someone starts off in the staffing world, and that first job out of college is at one of these multi-billion-dollar staffing companies where they're trying to make you dial the phone 200 times a day, then all of a sudden they're like, I never want to work in recruiting again. But it's like not all recruiting is staffing, right? The contingent recruiting and executive search retained significantly different than the staffing world, but they had that one job out of college at one of those big staffing companies, and they're never going to go back. And I think that's what a lot of the logistics and transportation companies do, is they seek out these supply chain people, they get them in there for a year or two, they got a bad experience, and they're like, screw this, I'd rather make lattes at Starbucks.
Yeah.
And that's just me projecting, because I really want a latte right now.
We can tell.
When you need it, you need it.
The Tim Hortons didn't make it. Didn't keep you moving.
I got coffee on the brain today, but I'm sure I'll get there. And because of supply chain issues, whatever it is I want, it'll be out of stock. So I just looking at the next, you keep thinking it's a short-term issue. And just to close this episode out, but we got this back, Ken and I did another episode where we talked about the backlog of stuff that people want to buy stuff right now. They can't get it. Then it's, we talked about the car dealerships where there's no cars on the lot and they're telling you, hey, we're not going to have extra inventory until the end of 2022. I ordered a truck 4 months ago. I still don't have a build date. So I don't know if like supply chain woes are going away anytime soon. So you stack that up upon also the shortage. How do we fix the shortage? Retrain people, pull everybody out of McDonald's and put them in manufacturing? That's not a solution. And so I don't know if there's like a 3 to 5 year fix for this. In fact, I don't know how you fixed it at all right now, other than you clone 5 million people that want to go fill all these roles. I mean, if we're short 10 million jobs right now, workers for those jobs, and then we want to add 5 million more, where in the hell is the people coming from? So I'm expecting a lot of turmoil, probably for the next decade, if it has any relation to jobs that people don't want to do. And unfortunately, many of those jobs are the things that we need to be done to live the way we live.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's all I got for this one.
Sounds good.
All right, I'll catch you.
Thanks, guys.